Right. I am going to talk about why handwriting instruction, explicit handwriting instruction, matters in our digital age. We're also going to talk about a little bit about keyboarding and how to explicitly introduce that, and how that can be introduced early on, and some other accommodations that can help students. So handwriting, links rich sensory motor representation to perceptual letter shapes and improves not only writing, but also reading performance compared to typewriting. And that was Kiefer et al. In 2015. So there has been research done on the link between handwriting and reading and writing performance. So handwriting, formal handwriting instruction, so explicit handwriting instruction does improve reading performance. So in your burst book, there is a history of the timeline of handwriting. It started about 6,000 years ago. And some of this is my own research, so it may not follow exactly what is in the verse book, but the Sumerians created the first schools, and they called them tablet houses, and they taught writing. They trained children in the Sumerian cuneiform, and they had them copy symbols on one half of a soft clay tablet onto the other half using a stylus. I found that fascinating. And then Plato, Seneca, and Quintilian, Greek and Roman philosophers, are believed to instruct students in tracing letters and later teaching sounds and letter forms simultaneously. The United States simplified stylus to cursive letters from Palmer, and Zane Blosser and Danilian. I've kind of condensed some of this timeline a little bit. So it's quite extensive. In the 1900s, penmanship was a separate subject in school. I found that fascinating. We not only have gone so far away from it that we are trying to get it back in to our curriculum. In the 1940s, there was a shift to a broader approach in language arts, and less time was devoted in handwriting. So it's been quite some time from the 1900s to 1940s where there was a shift from that separate time for penmanship to, a broader language arts approach, to now where we really want students to be more hybrid learners, not only in their reading, but also in their writing, where they are hybrid writers, where they're using the computer and also pen and paper, and they're using less of their hands. So we see more fine motor skill issues. So I just kind of wanted to touch on that. It's kind of interesting. Here are some of the research findings that support how handwriting influences reading and writing. Fluent writing letters activates the reading circuit in the brain. That is James and Engelhardt in 2012. Creating letters by hand engages networks the brain more than the keyboard. That's Behringer 2012. And letter fluency, that is writing legible letters from memory and reading, are linked. That's Young, Rose, and Nelson of 2015. And after explicit handwriting intervention, letters are orthographically mapped for later recall and rehearsal, which is very important, as we know, for that fluent spelling, right? So as they are writing our sentences and our words, they are not having to stop and recall what letter to spell with. So fluent writing eases the cognitive load for other complex writing tasks, and that's McCartney et al. 2013 and McCutcheon 1996. So that leads me into cognitive load, but I am going to stop for just a minute and show you a link to Denise Ide. Do we need to teach handwriting? She goes into a beautiful explicit instruction of why we need to teach handwriting. If you have not ever watched Denise Ide, this is an amazing video that is worth the time to watch. I'm not going to click on it today. I'm going to let you take the time to do that. We are going to go ahead and move into what is cognitive load. So cognitive load theory and reading instruction is the amount of information and processing required to complete a learning task. So if a student is asked to look at a simple sentence presented, so if you present it to a 4-year-old and you say, "Dad sat on the rock," in reading this sentence, on top of knowing each sound and match the letters, the child also has to recognize the capital D. They have to know the representation of that. They have to deal with the letter sound correspondences. They have to know the high frequency word "the." They have to know that TH says They have to know the schwa in that word. They also have to work out that 2 letters can represent the sound k. They also have to know what to do with a full stop. So there's a lot going on when you are asking a student to not only look at this sentence, but what if you dictate that to them and ask them to spell it? Depending on what you are asking of that student, depending on that task, that cognitive load may be large. So there are actually 3 types of cognitive load that the theory discusses, and that is intrinsic, extrinsic, and germane. So the intrinsic cognitive load is what I have to be able to do in the task. The extrinsic, is the conditions under which I have to do it. So, am I distracted? Is the pace of instruction too fast for me? Is the information being presented too fast, too slow? Am I, just distracted? The germane load is the effort or working memory required to process the information. So if the sentence is too long for that student and they cannot hold on to that information, their cognitive load is like overloaded. They may need that sentence chunked for that cognitive load to not be too high. So their handwriting may look awful if their cognitive load is also part of the equation. So if you're teaching handwriting, be cognizant of cognitive load, of what you are also asking them to do. Only focus on task at hand. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I know it is very easy to give a whole lot of instructions or give a whole lot of instructions very fast. And maybe things are going on next to your small group or out in the hall, shut your door. There's so many things that can hinder a student's learning. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So moving on, we have the reading rope, and hopefully you have all seen the Language Literacy Network. I'm not sure if you have. Hopefully you have. If not, this is your first time, and fantastic. But in the Language Literacy Network, we have language comprehension, and we have language expression, and we have the written word of recognition. She does a really good job of including all of the pieces that are in the Scarborough's reading rope and the simple view of reading. The one thing she includes that I believe is a little extra is the writing piece. It's the written word production. So I'm going to zoom into that because we are talking about letter identification and handwriting. So handwriting and letter formation is only one portion of the language literacy network, but I'm kind of zooming in on that because that's really where we're talking today. And it's a foundational piece that can really hinder a student if they're not fluent. So this skill really can play into the encoding and decoding and transcription of things. That handwriting, letter formation, even keyboarding, if a student needs to keyboard, they still have to identify letters. They still have to be able to find them on the keyboard. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Letter selection, they still have to know their alphabet. They still have to have the alphabetic principle. They still have to have those things in place and solid before they can get all of these other things down, before the encoding and decoding can occur. So all of that plays into them being a skilled writer and a skilled reader. That is that speech to print or that print to speech, right? All of that plays a part in them becoming fluent and not a frustrated writer and being stuck. So regardless of having learning disability or not, there are students sometimes that become stuck because maybe they're a perfectionist. They may be a gifted student and they're just a perfectionist, and it may not look right. It may not sound right. It may not, they may not know how to spell a word. They just may be having a bad day or they're whatever. But we want them to become as competent as they can in the skills that they have, so we don't have frustrated students. And this all plays into Erie's phases of reading because they move through this as they learn, right? It's the pre-alphabetic phase, the early alphabetic phase, where they have that partial alphabetic, that fully alphabetic, that consolidated phase as they begin to learn to spell and as they begin to learn to identify how these patterns of letters work together and how they can form them properly on the page. They are no longer frustrated. As they are pre-writers and they are imitating letters, and as we formally instruct them as to where these letters fit on the page, this helps with reversal. This helps with proper placement. This helps with memory. This helps with them moving through all of these phases as a writer and a reader. So, oh, sorry, this is in from another presentation. Oh, sorry, you can skip that one. And through all of the foundational skills of handwriting to develop print handwriting through K1, grade 2, cursive handwriting, the expectations grow, right? They develop those foundational skills of print. They develop cursive handwriting in second, and the expectation switches for them to know cursive and begin to use it. So this is the TEAC guide for Texas, the let's see, a Common Core, some of the other states use. I could not find a Common Core standard for print. I could find these are the Texas TEACs for print and cursive. I did find this wonderful website that shows that 21 states now require cursive handwriting to be taught in second and third grade. And the website is My Cursive. I know Arkansas does. Virginia is going back to it. Trying to think of some of the other ones off the top of my head. But you can click on this and see if your state is included in that. So my question is your state or district included, and how many of your students are fluent? Do you teach it? I am fortunate enough that I get to explicitly teach print and cursive to all of my dyslexic students. So I explicitly get to do that every day. And I have, oh gosh, 5. Let me think how many of my kids are using cursive in the classroom now. 6. And I have a second grader that is currently learning cursive. And he's the first one in his class because he's been seeing me all year. So they introduce it at the end of second grade, and his class has not started just yet. But he already knows how to write his name in cursive. So I have 6 students that exclusively use cursive, and their handwriting is beautiful. I do have a few dysgraphic kids, so they do struggle a little bit, but it's much better than it was when I got them. So I is explicitly teaching handwriting across state standards in KN5 essential to our literacy skills. Well, it helps create those connections to reading and writing, right? It helps make those connections so students can become fluent with those skills. And handwriting is a multisensory activity. As we form each letter, your hand shares information with the language processing area in your brain. As your eyes track what you're writing, you engage in these areas. The same goes if you say letter sounds in words as you write. And that's Sheldon Horwitz, 2018. So for my lessons, I just thought I might throw this in there for you. If you do not teach handwriting and you're thinking about doing so, the timing of a handwriting lesson, at first it will take you a little bit longer because you will have to establish a routine. So do not think that it will be 5 minutes at first. To integrate an explicit handwriting literacy lesson to your literacy lesson, it can take as little as 5 minutes. It can take up to 15 minutes, depending on how large your group is and how many questions your students have about the strokes and the letter that you're working on. I know when I first started with some of my students, we were taking, and I only see 2 to 5 students a day in my groups, not a day, 2 to 5 students in each group. I see almost 40 students a day, but, and it was taking me about 15 minutes, and now it takes me about 5 to 7 each time, depending on the letter, or if we're working on phrases or sentences. My students now write phrases and sentences in cursive. So, yeah, so we now have a really great routine. So student engagement is absolutely vital. They cannot talk about something else while they're doing their cursive. My students, some of them like to talk about the stroke of the letter. One of the easiest ones is the L, tall loop, and end with a smile. Some of my students really love air writing. Some of my older students, not so much. But they do like the stroke. Some of them like to say the name of the letter. So as they write it, L, right? It just depends on the student. I am actually flexible with that because I think for me, it is individual to the student. When you do a whole class, you may need them all to do the same thing. But as long as they're saying something, either the letter or the stroke, that verbiage helps them create that muscle memory and that orthographic mapping. So that learning involves the brain. That rehearsal definitely occurs when information goes to and from that working memory. It eventually goes to that long-term memory so they can retrieve it. The practice of that motor skill helps them make a conscious rehearsal, right? So a student can learn something new and not retain it if they're not focused on that. So I kind of like this quote when we were talking about handwriting, because again, if a student is not actively engaged, they're not going to retain. So repeat again when you hear, for by often hearing and saying the same things, what you have learned come complete in your memory. So I thought these were really good visuals about our working memory and how things go from our executive function or even our working memory into long-term memory. And sometimes we forget, or at least I've run into teachers that sometimes go, God, they feel like I've said the same thing over and over again. And there's days that I'm like, it's like I'm on day like 55 of saying this 100 times. Some students need 100 exposures of the same thing before it makes it to short-term or long-term memory. So just keep at it. Just keep at it. So that working memory, again, is their sketch pad, their visual sketch pad that, some of kids' working memory is that long. And they just may not be able to hang on to it. And until it makes it to their short-term memory, they just can't retrieve it. So, again, it's all about exposure, 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 and practice, practice, practice. So, and again, I know you've seen this before. This is our typical student and our dyslexic students, because our dyslexic students definitely need that handwriting piece to make those connections with our letters, to identify them. And if they reverse, again, not every dyslexic student reverses. So handwriting helps with that. So the areas of literacy that students with dyslexia struggle with or avoid is learning the alphabet, identifying print, handwriting, writing to write their name, learning their classmates' names, learning to write numbers, learning their address, all these things. So we've talked about this before. Handwriting is one of those things that they struggle with. So this formal, explicit handwriting instruction is important for our dyslexic students, again, to help with size, placement, and to hopefully prevent reversals if there are any. This explicit instruction, again, eases working memory and cognitive load. It can help students learn correct letter sound correlation, increase fluency of increase fluency of correct letter recall for spelling, support students decoding and reading words, phrases, and sentences. And it also supports social and emotional learning. When our students are not frustrated, they are not going to act out. When they learn a routine that is the same, there is less frustration in the classroom. So researchers support direct explicit instruction in letter formation, and they guide practice to become proficient in practice until automatic in handwriting of each letter, regardless of it being cursive or manuscript. The research supports the direct explicit instruction. So, and practice, 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 because when you do not practice, you can lose it. So I have also provided you some steps and strategies if you would like them. I'm not going to explicitly go through them. I'm going to kind of skim through. I'm going to let you read through these. I will post the PowerPoint. Again, proper pencil grip. There is, believe a YouTube video in here, and for sure a handout. Paper position and posture, that 45-degree angle. And when you choose to do explicit handwriting instruction, if you do not already have a program that your school or district has selected, you need to decide what you're going to do, but do not introduce the letters in alphabetical order. Introduce them by developmental order, and then plan when to include handwriting in your literacy instruction. Here are a few sample scopes and sequences. This is one of my favorites. If you would like a copy of it, believe it is out of print. I have a digital copy if you would like this cursive. It gives your student 3, 4, 5, 20, looks like 25 exposures. My students enjoy it, my dyslexic students, because they are not having to write on their own until the third row, and then they close their eyes, which I like because it creates that muscle memory orthographic piece when they close their eyes. So it's almost like the trace copy cover sheet, if you've ever used one of those, trace copy cover. And then once they do this and we have a few letters under our belt, we start writing words in their notebook. So they have enough muscle memory after doing these sheets that we can go ahead and start writing in their notebook in cursive. So my students are doing great. I don't always print they have words, but I don't print the word sheets for them to copy. I actually have them spell the words for me, and we talk about the stroke of the letter, and then we write them. So I don't print the word pages. I actually just have them write in their notebooks on lined paper. So when you are ready to start, you can gather your supplies and materials needed. You can even use a whiteboard, a dry erase board, and position it properly. I would suggest that it have lines on it. Slant boards are amazing for students that have dysgraphia. Sorry. Proper pencil grip. You can even create your own handwriting sheet here for the link. There's another one here. This talks about proper pencil grip and the ages. Here's another one. Tells you how to get your students to practice getting their pencil grip. And then you make your plan, whether you're doing print or cursive. And then you can begin. Depending on the age of your students, I would air write first. So you go from gross motor, L, right, to more fine motor, L, and then have them do the pen. So that is my suggestion. My older students don't like to air write. My 5th graders, my 4th graders, they humored me for a while, and then they told me they didn't really much care for it. So we do the finger tracing first, and then they write with their pencil. So that's my suggestion. Younger students definitely air write. And then give your student the name of the letter, walk them through the strokes that you want them to use, give them the verbiage, and have them air write, whiteboard, paper, have them use the same words every single time. So, and here's a sample script if you would like to use it. You do not have to. Here's a link to Smartboard handwriting slide, which is coming up. And here is what it looks like when you scaffold across the tiers of instruction, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. I just thought I might include this in here for you. And there is your handwriting for your Smartboard, your sheet. You can review your steps for air writing, your proper paper position, which is at a 45-degree angle. It shows you both left and right, which is important. When you teach a left-handed writer, I've had quite a few in the last few years. No spiral notebooks, or flip your spiral notebook backwards the other way. Don't make them write on the spiral. That hurts their arm. Just let them start in the back. So they're not having to write like monkey on that spiral. But slant boards help them also to ease any fatigue with their hand. So make sure you have anything printed for them in cursive for left-handed students. Please. It makes a huge difference. Here's an example of slant boards. I've had a few students over the last few years that use them. Take these things off the bottom, though. They hurt their arms. And they really improve handwriting a lot. They can help with reading too. I've noticed one of my students reads better on it, but I'm not sure why. And here are a few handwriting programs, explicit ones. The NEHAS Education Center, all of the resources are free. I think that's the only one that's free. When to use a keyboard, this is important. I know everybody's getting a keyboard now. It's kind of one-to-one everywhere, but it should be based on the need of the student. Always, 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 always explicitly teach them. And the need should be based on the student. That's my opinion. Because I want you to notice the difference between my keyboard. This is my MacBook that I use every day. And this is a Chromebook. This is what I think 90% of students use out there. A Chromebook has all lowercase letters. My MacBook, and I think even my Dell that I use at school, has capital letters. This can cause B&D confusion for dyslexic learners, or even learners that are still learning their letters. Like, think of those K and 1 kiddos that still confuse the B, D, P, and Q. Like they're still learning their letters, and we're expecting them to type on these computers. Oh, I know, it kind of makes my head hurt. So, I'm not thinking of just dyslexic learners right now. I'm thinking of those young students that are still learning their letters. And we're putting these in front of them. Okay, so that's just some information for all of you. If you have a student that reverses or struggles, you can put stickers on top of these to help them with capital letters if they can identify their capital letters better. Please do that for your student. There are capital letters you can buy. They are a little expensive, but they apparently are clear and amazing. You can teach students to recognize the keys on the keyboard. There's a way to do that. You teach the student the letter and you have them find it on the keyboard. And apparently the way you do that is you cover up almost every other letter except for the row that you are working on the letter in, and you have them find it in that row. So if your student is struggling, you can make a template and cover up everything except for the row where the letter is that they're struggling to find, and teach them to find that letter. So there's also this link to teach home row where they type. I'm trying to give you some resources. And here are how hybrid writers can fluently use both. Recently, what I have come to notice is that many students, regardless of having, because everyone has a computer, right? Everyone has a Chromebook or a computer of some sort. Speech to text is not always engaged. However, dictionaries, thesauruses, excuse me, spell check, the editing. There's so many tools on these computers that are engaged for students. Word prediction and speech to text are only for students with learning disabilities. However, there are other tools that are available to every student, regardless of IEP or not. So we are creating hybrid writers that can be fluent in both keyboarding and handwriting. So if we can get students to learn how to locate letters fluently on a keyboard and how to fluently write in either print or cursive, they can become fluent in both. If they can also quickly and fluently map the words they want to spell in handwriting and or on the computer, they are faster hybrid writers. So there's that. The more fluent you are in recalling and writing, regardless of which way you write, it's better to be fluent in both. Let me just leave it that way. But you do still need a signature. So cursive is important. Um, and here are a few more typing. Keyboarding. You know, most kids are like, it's keyboarding, not typing, Miss Height. They tell me that all the time. So here's some other alternative ways to help your students ease their cognitive load. Again, speech to text, word prediction, Google Slides, Jamboards, Flipgrid, Padlet. Padlet is an amazing, amazing tool. All the little sticky notes on there. So again, why handwriting matters. It improves reading, it increases orthographic knowledge, reduces cognitive load. And if your student knows cursive, it can reduce writing time because it has less pen strokes. Now, I threw in a sample for you. This is my son. This was when he was in second grade, when he was originally diagnosed with dyslexia. His handwriting was always fairly good. But you can see he it was, the size was up and down and everything. Anyway, this was when he was in, let's see, 8th grade. I think it was 8th grade. He knows cursive. He has his signature. He chooses to write in print. So there we are. I need to get permission to share some of my students that write in cursive, but I do not have permission to share that yet. So this is my favorite quote of all. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. I think that embodies the whole science of reading, the whole gradual release, because you're involving the students in their learning. You're explaining and you're having them involved and then you're releasing them. So I don't know. That's my favorite quote. Anyway, please let me know if you have any questions about anything that you have seen or heard or read this week. Happy reading, happy listening.